Queenie, thank you for the housekeeping duties. That was really great and well said. Just really happy that you're here. And so, everyone, I'm sure you now know how to communicate during this webinar. And so, let's begin. So, this webinar will discuss the ultimate clinical research toolbox and what it's about and how it can completely transform your career or your medical practice. And I titled this webinar from a quote that I took from HBO's Westworld. And it's a question. Have you ever questioned the nature of your reality? How are things going for you in your medical practice? How are things going for you with your staff or your career? Have you ever wondered if there is another way that could benefit you or your patients? So just think about this and ponder. Have you ever questioned the nature of your reality? During this webinar, I'm going to share some information that could really change the course of your life. So just pay attention. And if you're watching this after the webinar is over or listening to this, just pay attention because there might be some ideas that you can get that could cause you to think in a different way. So we are going to talk about the clinical research world, the mindset that is involved. I'm going to interject some questions as we go along the way, which is going to really help you with your mindset. And I'm going to talk about how the clinical research industry is very unique. And I'll talk about the formula for success. And then I'm going to discuss who I am on my clinical trials management journey. Then we're going to dive into the ultimate clinical research toolbox. And we're going to close with some inspiration. Does that work for everyone? Please type something in the chat box. Okay, fantastic. Let's move on. So let's start with the power of questions. If the path to your dreams is knowing where you are and getting to where you want to go, why aren't you there yet? And then a second question, right? A lot of people will tell you the way out is setting the right goals or that you have to work very hard to get there. Is that really accurate? So just the things that you want to start thinking about. Then let me ask you this. Can you talk about the clinical trials industry, how it contributes to the advancement of healthcare, how running quality clinical research sites can transform your staff and your patients, or how a clinical trials practice can actually add a 6-month figure income monthly? So if the answer is no, then you probably have no idea about running clinical trials or how that can impact your life, your clinic, or your career. And I often look at the clinical trials industry or that landscape as the land of 1,000 mansions. And we obviously need the right keys to get into these locked up mansions, and the gifts of clinical trials rest within those mansions, right? And I have this visual of people standing outside in chatter, and there are all this bunch of keys, and everyone is trying to figure out how to get there. So basically, my hope is that at the end of this course, I'll answer some of the questions that you've had if you thought about the clinical trials industry or you've never heard about it, and that I can give you the keys, the right keys that fit these mansions in the clinical trials world that can allow you to really benefit from the gifts within. Okay, fantastic. I see someone just clapped. That's really great. So, why is this industry unique? And what makes it so special? One of my favorite definitions is from the Australian National Health Medical Research Council, and in terms of how clinical trials are defined, because it really makes it easy for anyone to understand. So clinical trials are research investigations in which people volunteer to test new treatments, interventions, or tests as a means to prevent, detect, treat, or manage various diseases or medical conditions. And some investigations look at how people respond to a new intervention and what side effects might occur. So I'm going to leave it up for a little bit. I'm sure that some people might want to, read through this. But the main takeaway is that we are using other human beings, or other human beings are participating in or volunteering to have new treatments tested on them that can be used to prevent, detect, or treat various diseases, right? That's what the big takeaway is. And who are the players in this industry? Now, the players are pretty much the same across every country. Of course, it might vary in different areas of the world just based on the name and really what the regulatory requirements are. But I would speak for the US. In the US, we have the FDA, which is the main regulatory body that governs the industry. And then, of course, we have the sponsor, that is the person who owns the product that is being researched, right? They're researching and this product because they want to see how it can be brought to the market. Just in layman's terms, we're gonna get a bunch of clinical research facilities. We're gonna test these products on their patients, and then we're gonna use the data, study it, and see if we can submit it to our regulatory body so that it can be approved for use in the public, right? And then we also have a clinical research organization, or CRO, that is a middleman that would take some of the trials or the studies or the projects from the sponsor, who could be the biotech, the biopharma, or an individual, and they can manage one aspect or many aspects of the trial. So they could only say, oh, we're going to work with the data management piece. That's fine. Or they can say, no, we're going to work with the clinical operations side. We're going to basically manage the whole project, right? And then you have the institutional review board, as we call them in the US, or the independent institutional ethic committees, as they're known in other countries, or independent ethics committees, as they're known in other countries. And it's just an oversight body that's it's over the clinical research side. So it's an added layer of oversight that ensures that the trial that is at the clinical research side is being run and it's safe for the patients and there's quality data. And then in some trials, you might have a data monitoring board or a data safety monitoring board that monitors the safety of the trial. It might also look at certain milestones to ensure that the trial is proceeding as normal and that patients are also safe as well. Or there are certain data points that are really crucial in the trial, and they actually want to take a look at those to really make sure that things are going as planned. You will also have vendors in the clinical trials industry. They could be recruitment vendors that help the clinical trial sites recruit, or you can have a vendor that supplies everything that's needed for the trial. You can have lab vendors, in case there are certain samples that have to be drawn from the patients, and those lab vendors will be involved. And then there are a whole bunch of different vendors that can be involved depending on what kind of clinical trial it is. So that's really the industry in a nutshell, right? But the unique challenges of this industry, like any other industry would have, are that the first thing is that we have a shortage of clinical research sites. I mean, if you really think about it, there's no university course that tells you how you can run, set up, and profit from a clinical research site. I mean, there's no such things. You might take a course on clinical operations, right? How do you manage a clinical trial? What a clinical trial is about? The history of clinical trials. But there is really no way of us to formally train a site on clinical research management. And so the trend is typically that a doctor wants to get involved in clinical trials, and then they speak to another medical doctor, and they sort of get together and figure out what they're supposed to do. And so the sites that are currently in the clinical trials industry are really the source of all that training. In worst case scenario, I mean, if you happen to stumble, in a situation where you want to be involved in clinical trials and you just start take a whole bunch of certifications and don't know exactly what you're doing, I mean, that's really a horrible scenario because it will not end well, right? So you really need a system that is proven and predictable that can show you how to run a clinical trial. And so we have shortage of clinical research facilities because of that. We cannot train enough medical doctors as quickly as possible to meet the demand for all the trials that we are running. And what happens is that, like I said, we keep using the same facilities over and over. Then, of course, the next thing is staff shortage, right? Because it's such an experience-based industry, it's really another challenge to get as many people up and going at the clinical research side, right? That's another thing. And so what ends up happening is that there's high staff turnover. You might be an ophthalmologist, interested in clinical trials. You may be, find out from a colleague of yours. You set up a few people at your side. Maybe there's someone from your friend's clinic who comes over to train people at your facility. And then there's really no system in place, right, to ensure that the staff are trained. And industry wide, we don't have enough people to run clinical trials anyway, period. Then, of course, the other challenge is a new technology. The industry is morphing and changing in terms of how we capture the data from the trials, how we run the clinical trials, the systems that are being used for input and output. So that's also changing. And then we have a need for special populations, especially in the US with the massive growth in diversity. We it is mandated actually now by the FDA that if you're going to run a clinical trial, the expectation is that your trial has to reflect the changing nature of the population of the United States. And again, worldwide it's the same thing, right? We need to make sure that the drugs coming to the market cannot just be tested on one type of population. We want to make sure that the different types of people that it can benefit. And so there's a need for special populations. And what that translates is that if you're a doctor or a medical practice, say, who has a population that is maybe of Chinese descent, and you could just market your site as a site that really caters to that population, right? And that's always really helpful. And of course, if you have a really diverse population, people of different descent, ages, gender, I mean, that's always fantastic as well. And then the last challenge, of course, is globalization. There's a lot of outsourcing of clinical trials now all over the world, and so opportunities are opening up in different countries to conduct clinical trials. We now also have the potential of virtual trials where the data is captured in different places and then it's fed into one system that way it can be managed centrally. And so there's really no need for clinical trials just to be run in the US. You can run them anywhere and have real world data that you can actually monitor. So these challenges are actually opportunities for success if you're interested in getting into the clinical trials world. So let's talk about success, right? And let me just check in with everybody. Please wave if you're still listening. Great. Okay, good. Okay, great. Fantastic. Let's keep going. Financial and personal success has a lot to do with being in the right place at the right time. But we are sometimes in the right place at the right time, many times in our lives where we don't make it. I mean, I can remember situations where I am right there, everything has come together. Wow, this is perfect, and I know something amazing will come out of this, and then nothing happens. Why? It's because of awareness, right? If we're not aware that we're in the right place at the right time, awareness is missing. And I often have a story that I tell about, trekking around in the Sahara Desert, and then you come to an area that looks like an oasis, right? Thirsty, hungry, not sure what to do. And you're just sitting there and crying and saying, oh my goodness, I need food, I have to eat something. And then nothing ever happens, and you see a strange looking tree with really brown objects, and you're like, I wonder what that is. And not that it doesn't really make sense to you, and so you end up probably losing your life. Or I know that sounds really bad, but chances are you're in the Sahara Desert, so if you can't eat and you can't drink water, chances are you're going to waste away. And then somebody else comes along who knows a lot more about the benefits of the desert. They come to the same oasis looking area and they look up and see the brown looking objects. They're like, oh my goodness, dates, I can eat dates. And they have dates, right? So they have a higher chance of surviving than you are. You are at the right place at the right time, but you were not aware that you were, and so you suffered from that. So that's my little story about that. But consider how your life would change if everything in our life comes from the level of awareness. How would your life change if your awareness just expanded by a small degree? So or by getting new information that you're not aware of. So right now, listening to this webinar, you're getting new information. You know, you're at the right place at the right time and you're aware, and you're not going to suffer because, you know, you are absolutely aware. So these are just little checks that I think that we have to pay attention to in life, because oftentimes opportunity comes and it goes. You know, opportunity is like a train, you know, it stops by, certain people get on, and then it goes away, and that's what keeps happening. So the next thing I want to say is you want to plant this idea deep in your mind. One of the ways to achieve massive success is that you want to have effective education combined with professional coaching over a reasonable period of time. Okay, really think about this, and I'm going to discuss this later as we come to the ultimate clinical research toolbox. Effective education, right? Take a book, you need a book on a certain topic, you read it, it's fantastic, it's effective, it helps you out. But then guess what? Professional coaching, someone then answers all your questions about what you're reading in the book and how you can even make things better. And they do that over a reasonable period of time that guarantees that you really become involved with whatever it is that you're studying. So that said, let me talk a little bit about myself because I've been going on for a while and it's time to do that. I came into the clinical trials industry about 15 years ago as a newbie, you know, brand new person. I had done an internship with the United Nations Tribunal for Rwanda and subsequently worked there for a little bit. And in my mind, I always thought, you know, wouldn't it be nice if I could work in an industry that was similar? You know, the UN impacts the whole world, right? Whatever happens there is impactful in so many different countries. And then I literally stumbled in the clinical trials industry. And I won't go into the details about my journey, but it was just one of those things that happened. And I was aware that I was at the right place at the right time, and I took advantage of it. But little did I know how my life will transform because of this. So I came in as an admin assistant, and I thought, you know what, I'm educated, and I'm just gonna do this temporarily while getting something better. And then when that window opened and I became aware, I moved into data management. I later became a monitor, monitoring clinical research sites, went into a senior level, and then I created my own company and became a consultant and went into more leadership roles, helping manage studies first in the US and then now globally across various countries. And I've worked from small companies to large companies, both on the sponsor side and the clinical research organization side, and for vendors. I've worked in many therapeutic areas, from oncology, which is probably one of the most complex, to really orphan drugs, or for rare diseases, devices, biologics. I mean, pretty much a whole plethora of therapeutic areas and the types of products that are being researched. And in addition to that, I have been very instrumental in coaching and mentoring study teams and clinical research sites. I've helped doctors also really create best practices on how to make their site super successful in running clinical trials, right? And I've also organized various global audits and also created best practices for that. In addition to that, I personally studied online and offline marketing just because I really wanted to operate at a level of excellence when I was managing my global clinical trials. So I'm not just saying this to kind of, toot my own horn, but I'm saying this because my experience in this industry has caused me to really develop a passion for clinical trials. And I have seen what it can do at a medical practice, at a hospital, and how it can truly transform the life of the clinicians, their staff, and their patients. So now I'm going to dive into the ultimate clinical research toolbox. And before I do that, let me check in on everybody. Just wave your hand, say hi in the chat box if you're still here. Okay, fantastic. I see Mary's going. Yay, that's awesome. Great. So let me put a little bit of mental training out there. The one reason you are not where you want to be is because you don't understand how you're getting your current results, right? If you knew how you are getting your current results, then you can accomplish anything. And I compare this to, I grew up around a lot of football, and in the US it's called soccer. But I would say I'm in a football game and we're kicking the ball around, and for some reason I keep scoring, and I just keep scoring goal after goal after goal, right? And it's just interesting because I don't know why I keep scoring all these goals, but for some reason I'm doing that, and then at some point I can't do it anymore and it stops. So basically, if I don't understand why I'm scoring those goals, then I can probably, the chances of me doing the same thing in the future are nil, right? So we have to really understand the results that we're getting in our lives so that we can rise to a higher level of excellence. So that's something that you might want to think about. And so, with all of this in mind, I created the Ultimate Clinical Research Toolbox, based on my experience in the clinical trials industry, proven systems for success. And so it's a step by step guide which helps you, and by you, I mean the medical doctor, any healthcare practitioner who wants to be, run clinical trials, anyone who wants to work at a clinical research site. But that's really what the course is about. It helps you to set up, run, and profit from clinical research trials anywhere in the world. Clinical research is the same anywhere in the world. The regulatory bodies might change, the systems that are being used might change, the language being used might change, but basically it's the exact same thing. We have a product, we want to study it, we have patients volunteer, we try the product, we gather the data, we send it back to the sponsor company, and that gets submitted to the regulatory body. That's it. Okay. And the ultimate clinical research toolbox is a proven, predictable, and measurable system that guarantees success. So it's proven because it has been used to set up various clinical research facilities. It is predictable. Why? Because with that system, you have predictable training and you have predictable marketing, right? And then it's measurable, which means that you can measure the success. And I'm very big about measured and measurable things, because that's the one of the huge ways why we can be successful in everything that we're doing. So I'm extremely passionate about clinical trials management, clearly. And so one of the things that triggered, a few things triggered my creation of this program. What I noticed throughout the years was that principal investigators and the staff have a very high chance of getting dinged by a sponsor of the FDA doing audits. Okay, in addition to that, sites that have like maybe only less than 1 year of experience in clinical trials management, worst scenario, they have a high chance of being banned by the FDA, dinged, during routine audits that I would organize for global trials. Typically, those are the sites that have a lot of issues because, again, they kind of stumble in the industry and they really don't know what they're doing, right? And then the staff who do not have the experience for success. So it's not just that they're running the trials, but many of the staff don't really know. I mean, they really don't know how to set up and manage a site. So it's one of those things where it's the actual day-to-day management is more word of mouth. Maybe call up another site that has been running clinical trials and say, oh, how do you do this? Oh, I got it. Okay. And the one story I hear all the time from medical doctors, or whenever I travel, when I'm in conferences and I'm organizing events, it's that I have just how do I run a clinical research site? Like, what are the things that I have to do? It's just something that keeps coming up over and over. Oh, we started this trial, we really don't know what we're doing, we need help. And that's something that is keeps you occurring. And then, of course, what does that lead to? Staff turnover. So you don't have a predictable system that can train your staff and ensure that you have clinical trials coming through. And most of them are, like I said, they happen to stumble into clinical trials like I did. I basically stumbled into it and kind of worked my way through. And just imagine at the site level having people who are not well experienced, and then of course with the staff shortage. So what happens is that you get a revolving door, constant staff turnover, right? And then another big issue is principal investigator oversight. Many of the medical doctors and principal investigators I work with over the years, A lot of them, if they're new to research, don't really understand the importance of them being present in the on the trial, the study. So you can get the protocol, which tells you how the trial is going to be run, and all the procedures from the sponsor. And the sponsor is interested in you running their project according to their protocol, right? According to their study procedures and process. But they're not going to tell you that, you have to meet with your staff at least once a month and you have to document that. They're not going to tell you that, it's really important that, when looking at the documents that are being used to capture the data, you want to make sure you have notes in there and that kind of thing. No one's going to tell you that, right? Because they assume that you know already. Then the other thing I noticed was the understanding of clinical trials procedures. Yes, so you get a protocol, right, for the study. How do you read a protocol in the most efficient manner? What are you targeting? What are the areas that you need to target that's going to really give you insight into what the trial is about? But in addition to that, you can have the medical expertise. But what about the operations side of things? Are you paying attention to that? The other big trend is medical doctors and their staff partnering up with individuals or organizations who, in some cases, might have the experience, but in many cases, do not have the experience. The medical doctor doesn't understand what their role is or what their staff's role is. And then, they think they're just there to sign a bunch of documents, and it can get really, really complicated and complex. And then, of course, there's no proven, measurable, predictable system to acquire new trials. So you're interested in clinical trials, but you don't know how to get trials. And if you're already in clinical trials, you got one trial and for some reason you're not getting any more because you don't have a measurable, predictable system in place, right? And then, of course, I talked about operational issues just from the lack of knowledge and experience. So the ultimate clinical research toolbox was really created to address these issues and even more. And it really bridges the gap between knowledge and experience. And what makes this program so effective and extraordinary is that it is a highly structured step by step process. It's a comprehensive study program that's designed to facilitate positive, profound, and permanent change in any clinical trials practice, which means that if you want to get involved in clinical trials research, or you want to take your clinical research site to the next level of excellence, this course is for you. I had talked about effective education combined with professional coaching over a reasonable period of time guarantees massive success, right? So, the ultimate clinical research toolbox is structured that way. We have the program at the center of the course, and then you get weekly coaching calls, you get additional support to address all the questions that you have, not just in terms of the course, but as you start getting clinical trials. What are the operational issues that are going on, and how can you be helped with that? So you get that support, and it's over a reasonable period of time. In this case, it's in the lifetime of how long you want to manage clinical trials. And best, the ideal case is that love it when I set up one facility and it's doing really well, and then the medical doctor and staff now go out and create additional facilities. We call those satellites, but that's always great because it means that you're really paying attention and you really understand how this whole clinical trials industry can benefit. Okay, so it's a revolutionary course. It's the first of its kind. It really is the first of its kind because you have certifications in the industry and you have seminars and webinars, which I will get into, but there's really no course that can say, here's your clinical research side, you're starting from zero, let's build it into a clinical trials machine of excellence for you and your staff, right? And it also not just trains you, but your staff. And if you have staff turnover, then there's always something that you can put in place to ensure that there are no lapses and there are no issues. And again, 4 main goals: to set up, manage, and profit from a clinical research site anywhere in the world. It gives you skills and insider knowledge from different vantage points. It's a powerful coaching and success system, and it also provides cutting edge marketing techniques that sustain success. And of course, the bonus is the mindset training, which really gives you not just inspirational tools but coaching techniques that you can use as success to be as successful as possible, and also something that can be used by your staff to ensure that people have the right mindset to run clinical trials. And then the advantage again is you're getting different vantage points. So you're getting what the sponsor wants and their expectations are, in this what the data management piece is about, or the clinical operations piece is about, what the different vendors want, what the expectations are for you, as the principal investigator, what are the expectations for your staff as well. And then of course you're getting marketing techniques to guarantee you have a pipeline of studies. And this is my favorite because I have really taken the time to put together a success system where you're always going to get clinical trials. And this is created just from the way that I helped facilities to expand their studies pipeline. It's really, like I said, it's really insider knowledge. Then I talked about the weekly coaching sessions to address all your questions. We have Facebook Live Q&A as well, and we also have YouTube videos that can really clarify and expand your awareness of what happens at the clinical research site, and so much more. Certifications give you historical knowledge or good clinical practice, history. Those are the kinds of trainings that are in the clinical research industry, right? And their conference, their webinars on regulatory trends. And what you will notice is that because it's such a highly regulated industry at the level of the FDA, as you start trickling down, it is regulated, but the systems that are in place get weaker and weaker. And by the time that you get to the clinical research site, when the trial is being run, the sponsor has certain expectations, but they don't have the time to set up new research facilities. No sponsor is going to go out there and say, I'm going to train 10 medical doctors on how to run and operate clinical trials. What they're interested in is, I have to get my product to the market, and there are certain facilities that already run clinical trials, and I'm just going to stick to them because they're a proven system, right? They've been through all the kinks and all the different struggles, and now I'm just going to use these facilities. And if in some trials that I manage, if I come across a facility that is brand new and there are issues, we typically let them go because we can't really take any risks. So if smaller companies, they have a really small team, they don't have the resources to bring on and train and figure out, if this medical doctor can run a clinical research site, or their staff can. So those are some of the things that you want to pay attention to. And in my mind, I think, what if we had hundreds of new facilities and staff added each year that were skilled and qualified, that had a measurable, proven, predictable system for managing clinical trials and acquiring more clinical trials. What will that translate to? More income for medical practice clinics or hospitals, right? More patients access to clinical trials, clinicians and staff with a balanced work schedule, quality data and safe patients, faster delivery for new products to the market. I mean, really, everyone benefits. So, who is the ultimate clinical research toolbox for? If you want to have a successful clinical research site and ensure how to do it, this is for you. If you want to work at a clinical research site, or if you want to partner up with a medical doctor and run a successful clinical research site, this is for you. Or if you've tried to set up a clinical research site in the past and for some reason it never worked, this is for you. Or if you're a clinical research site and you have no predictable, measurable training or marketing system in place, this is for you. Or if you're my favorite, if you're ready to make serious changes in your life and you're aware that you're ready to make those changes, this course is for you. This course, I would say, is not for someone who is not ready to quickly and permanently transform their goal, their dreams, or desires to own a successful clinical research site into a reality. People who make excuses and complain. I'll repeat, people who make excuses and complain. This is not for you. People who are stuck in information gathering mode and are not prepared to take the action and get results. So this course is not for you. Now, in closing, I want to leave you with this inspiration from Neville Goddard, and just something that you might want to think about as you're going through your day. Man's chief delusion is his conviction that there are causes other than his own state of consciousness. All that befalls a man, all that is done by him, all that comes from him, happens as a result of his state of consciousness. A man's consciousness is all that he thinks and desires and loves and all that he believes is true and consents to. That is why a change of consciousness is necessary before you can change your outer world. Rain falls as a result of a change in the temperature in the higher regions of the atmosphere. So, in like manner, a change of circumstance happens as a result of a change in your state of consciousness. Be ye transformed by the renewing of your mind. Neville Goddard. I thank you so much for your time. We are now going to move into the Q&A session, and I look forward to your questions, and thanks again for listening. Queenie, we're ready for Q&A.